get around the War Powers Act. You remember he declared victory, the war was over on Friday. Now he's starting a new operation, Freedom. And this is just a pretext to restart the war.
Friday, victory is declared. Monday, a new operation begins. Is this a strategic pivot or a constitutional shell game designed to bypass the American people? Larry Johnson says the clock just got reset, and the implications for our rule of law are massive.
Ultimately, the U.S. will blink, Iran will not. And if they dare to insert a U.S. naval vessel into that strait, it will be sunk.
Larry made that prediction, and minutes later, the first missile was in the air. We aren't just looking at a map, we're looking at a fundamental shift in how American power is being challenged. You need to see this. Welcome back to ARM Geopolitics. I'm Aaron Johnson. On this channel, we don't just cover the news. We cut through the noise, we dominate the narrative, and give you the analysis mainstream media is too scared to run. Vigilance is our shield, truth is our weapon. Let's get into it. Now, I want to be optimistic about Project Freedom. As a patriot, I want American initiatives to succeed, but we have to deal in reality, not press releases. The White House is framing this as coordination. But when you look at the deployment of A-10 Warthogs and F-18s to Al Dhafra, the data tells a different story. Those aren't coordination tools. They are high-intensity combat assets. While the media focuses on the branding, we're looking at two parallel crises. A direct kinetic threat in the Strait and a historical legal shift in China that threatens the very foundation of our financial leverage. America is at a crossroads, and the old playbook isn't working. So let's look at the receipts. Trump announces Project Freedom. The goal? Keep the oil flowing and markets stable. On the surface, it's exactly what an America First energy policy needs. But then the contradictions start piling up.
Project Freedom is a process for countries, insurers, and shipping groups to coordinate vessel movement through the Strait of Hormuz, according to the Wall Street Journal. The initiative, set to begin Monday morning, does not currently include U.S. Navy escorts, focusing instead on organizing safe passage through coordination. CENTCOM forces will begin supporting Project Freedom. So this is just a bit bizarre, because if they're talking about this not being kinetic, then why would CENTCOM sources be needed? So the Wall Street Journal says that this will be just working with insurers, and shipping groups to coordinate vessel movement.
Right.
So if that's what they're going to do, why is CENTCOM involved, and why we're talking about the UAE base? Obviously, It's because they expect Iran not to allow those ships to pass through unless those ships pay the fee. There it is. In CENTCOM's own statement, the Maritime Freedom Construct aims to combine diplomatic action with military coordination.
Mm-hmm.
You see the gap? The Wall Street Journal says no escorts. CENTCOM says military coordination. Look, as a guy who believes in American strength, I have no problem with protecting our interests. But let's call it what it is. You don't park the tank killer, the A-10, in the UAE just to talk to insurance adjusters. This is an escort mission with a different name. The real question is, why the word games? Larry thinks it's not just about the ships, it's about the law.
I think this is Trump's way to get around the War Powers Act. You remember he declared victory, the war was over on Friday. Now he's starting a new operation, Freedom. And this is just a pretext to restart the war. This is another excuse to continue the war. That's all. They ran up against the 60-day limit under the War Powers Act. Now they say, okay, the war's over. We don't need to report. Congress doesn't need to approve. And then boom, we're right back into it. 2 days. They just waited 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. They chose the May 1st. Okay, war's over. We've won. They've lost. End of the War Powers Act for now. And then wait 2 days. Oh, we got a new mission. This is just a ploy. This is all it's all a complete facade and a charade.
This is where we have to be constitutionalists first. The War Powers Act is there for a reason, to ensure the American people, through Congress, have a say in where our sons and daughters are sent to fight. The 60-day clock on the Iran conflict ran out right around May 1st. By declaring victory on Friday and starting a new operation on Monday, the administration effectively resets the clock. It avoids a messy congressional vote. I support a strong executive, but not at the expense of our constitutional framework. If we want to win, we need the country behind us, not a legal workaround.
At that time, Iran had, small boats. They had some helicopters, but they didn't have any kind of navy to speak of. And but they had been laying mines. They had some older ships. They laid mines in the Persian Gulf, and the United States launched this oil escort operation to escort the oil tankers, to remove those mines. That was done back then. Iran didn't have drones. They didn't have ballistic missiles. They didn't have cruise missiles. They didn't have underwater drones. They didn't have they had none of that. And so the United States was able to operate freely militarily in the Persian Gulf. Nobody thought anything about it. Not now, not today. Man, it's a different world. And sinking that will lead to fatalities among sailors, and it'll be a big black eye. There will be demands for the United States to ramp up, to respond. Can't let Iran get away with this, and Iran will keep getting away with it because we don't have the military force. The naval force no longer makes sense. It made sense 25 years ago, when pre-drone era, and when Iran didn't have this plethora of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. But now these ships are vulnerable. And in the era of hypersonic missiles, they have no defense. And so their only defense is to stay at arm's length, stay outside the range of those weapons. If you stay outside the range, they can't hurt you. But once you cross that, you're dead.
In 1987, we dominated the Gulf because the technology gap was a canyon. But today, that gap has closed. Iran has spent decades building an asymmetrical area denial canopy, drones, hypersonic missiles, and mini-subs. We're also facing a munitions reality. CSIS reports show our precision stockpile is under heavy strain. As a techno-optimist, I believe American innovations can overcome this, but we can't innovate if we're operating on 1980s assumptions. Sending a billion-dollar destroyer into a swarm of $20,000 drones isn't just risky, it's bad math. The announcement was made, the coordination was set, and then, before the ink could even dry, the kinetic reality hit the water.
Just so you know, Iran just responded, just now, Iran, you didn't even wait till your time. Just now, as you're speaking, breaking, a tanker was hit by unknown projectiles just north of Fujairah. Yeah. UAE. Yep. Just now, sorry to interrupt you. It just happened now. I thought you'd want to know just now. It seems Iran is saying, like, just sending a clear message here.
Yeah. Hey, FAFO.
Literally within minutes of it hasn't been even an hour this was announced. And there's also another Project Freedom launched this morning. Shortly after, the IRGC Navy struck a vessel with anti-ship missiles 78 nautical miles off Fujairah, UAE. Fujairah's up more north. The ship failed to comply with multiple warnings. Iran's answer to Project Freedom is already on the water. CENTCOM said any interference will be dealt with forcefully. The IRGC just tested that promise on day one. What happens next determines whether the strait reopens or escalates. The IRGC Navy has ordered vessels anchored at Ras Al Khaimah in the UAE to move immediately towards Dubai or face consequences. Multiple vessels masted in Minik Satar and Ras Al Khaimah received direct VHF calls from the IRGC. The message: heave anchor and move towards Dubai, or the consequences are their responsibility.
Let me put the timeline on screen. Less than an hour. That's how long it took for Iran to answer Project Freedom. They didn't blink. They didn't wait to see if we were bluffing. They fired. CENTCOM says interference will be dealt with forcefully. As Americans, we want to see that resolve. But now the bluff has been called. If we escalate, we need to be prepared for what comes next. This isn't a drill anymore.
I think it's going to go hot. It's kinetic. And so the United States is still laboring under the illusion that it can actually forcibly open the Strait of Hormuz, and that it is militarily impossible as long as Iran has drones and short range and intermediate range ballistic missiles. As long as they have those, there's no way
Oh,
to
wow.
guarantee an opening of the strait that will allow ships to pass unhindered. Well, not only respond to those, it'll begin launching on all targets, all U.S. targets and Israeli targets. So the ceasefire will be over. You know what they're ignoring? The underwater drones, the mini subs with torpedoes. Those are there too. And nothing that they're talking about affects the short-range ballistic missile, the coastal defense cruise missile. No, this is madness.
The missile is the toughest
yeah.
one, yeah.
I was just going to say, you know, if you want to open the strait, if the goal is, okay, we want to open the strait, meaning we want a ship to be able to sail in and out of the Strait of Hormuz without fear of being attacked. The only way you could do that would be to have probably a 2 million man army march into, you know, land there at the Strait of Hormuz and march inland about 100, 200 miles to secure all the launch sites. It's the only way. And we're not going to do that. That's impossible.
Worst case scenario, this is just justification for a war. They know Iran will respond. They're ready for war. The second one is this is the U.S. Trying to pull away the leverage that Iran has on the Strait of Hormuz during negotiations. And the third one is naivete, that they believe this will actually work and Iran will not retaliate.
Naval lays out 3 scenarios for why this operation was launched: war pretext, negotiating leverage, or genuine belief it would work. Johnson picks door 1. CENTCOM doesn't pre-position A-10s and Hornets at Al Dhafra for coordination exercises. That equipment is there because someone expects Iran to fire on ships. And when Iran fires, the US responds. When the US responds, Iran escalates across the board, not just at sea. 2 million troops to secure the launch sites. That's what it would actually take. Johnson's number. The operation has 15,000. In the dimension almost nobody is covering: underwater drones, mini subs with torpedoes. These don't appear on the same sensors as surface threats. When Johnson says this is madness, this is specifically what he means. I believe in the spirit of the American soldier, but we have to be honest about the scale. We can't solve a 2 million man problem with a 15,000 man solution and hope that tech bridges the whole gap. We need a strategy that matches the reality on the ground. The missile strike, as significant as it is, might not be the most important thing that happened here. Because while everyone was watching the strait, China did something with American sanctions that has never happened before in the history of US financial power.
Oh, okay.
He said, Mario, even when it comes to Russian war, this never happened. He said, I'll read out the news. China just ordered its domestic companies to ignore US sanctions targeting Chinese refiners tied to the Iranian oil trade, including Haigli Petrochemical. Affected firms had been hit with US asset freezes and transaction bans. China's Ministry of Commerce called the US measures unlawful and a violation of international norms. Beijing issued a directive prohibiting recognition or enforcement of the sanctions inside China. So the banks that have been ordered by the US to freeze those assets of these Chinese companies, they've been ordered by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, to not listen to these orders from the US.
Correct.
So there's a direct clash here before Xi Jinping's and Trump's meeting. Comes days after Treasury warned about Chinese teapot refineries doing business with Iran. This is China openly rejecting the US financial pressure architecture in real time. For weeks, the US has been tightening a financial blockade on Iran that runs parallel to the naval one, sanctioning shadow banking networks, threatening Chinese refineries, and warning shippers off Iranian tolls. Beijing just told all those measures to take a hike and instructed its companies to act as if the sanctions don't exist. Okay, this is more significant. This is the first time China has formally activated its 2021 blocking rules, anti-foreign sanctions countermeasures, with a specific injunction. It legally shields the companies, bans Chinese entities from complying with US measures, and frames them as null inside China. So my guess were correct, because my guess we're talking, if you guys were watching my interviews earlier, we're saying that this is Mario, this is very significant. I was telling my team about it. And now Grok is confirming that. And obviously, you could take grok with a grain of salt. Previously, China protested, used general countermeasures, or quietly enabled evasion, as we know through the shadow fleet with Russia. This is a direct public legal override, creating clearer conflicting obligations for banks, shippers.
Now, let me make sure this lands, because it's easy to read China defies US sanctions and think, yeah, they do that all the time. This is different. This is the first time China has formally activated its 2021 anti-foreign sanctions law with a specific injunction. Not quiet evasion, not shadow fleet workarounds. A formal Ministry of Commerce directive that legally binds Chinese banks and companies to ignore American sanctions, and frames those sanctions as null and void inside Chinese territory. What this means practically: any Chinese bank that receives a US Treasury order to freeze assets tied to Iranian oil is now legally required by Chinese law to not comply. Two governments, conflicting legal orders, same bank. That's not a trade dispute. That's a direct clash over who governs the global financial system. And timing is not a coincidence.
The era of U.S. bullying is over. You know, it doesn't mean the U.S. is going to stop trying to bully other countries, but China now has thrown down and said, no, we're not doing it. Make us. Because the reality is the power dynamic is with China, not with the United States. There's not a single damn thing that the United States makes that China needs. Are there things that the United States needs that only China produces? Absolutely. Pharmaceuticals, the rare earth minerals essential items for U.S. military production. And so the United States it's not in a position to command, and it pretends like that this is 20 years ago when China sort of depended upon the U.S. market to sell and keep itself going. It's weaned itself off the U.S. market now. That's what these knuckleheads in Washington, D.C. don't understand.
Two parallel blockades against Iran: naval at the Strait, financial through sanctions on anyone doing business with Iranian oil. In this same operation, both took serious damage. Naval, IRGC fired on a ship within 60 minutes of the announcement. Financial, China formally nullified the US sanctions within its borders. The naval blockade was always about military capability, and we've covered the math on that. The financial blockade was supposed to be the remaining leverage, the dollar, SWIFT, Treasury enforcement, and China just said, not on our territory. The question this raises from an America First perspective is, if we can't enforce sanctions on China and we can't project military force through the strait, what leverage does America actually have left in this conflict? That's not rhetorical. That's the question that should be dominating every policy conversation right now. It isn't.
And last thing I want to go through with you, Larry, for the audience, let's kind of try to see how that escalation ladder would look like and what it could lead to. And what do you think it likely lead to? Do you think that one of the countries will blink, one of the sides will blink? So Iran will test the US resolve, the US would blink, there'd be some deal, or vice versa. Iran blinks, the US responds militarily, strikes Iranian vessels, and Iran does not want a continuation of the war. Would they blink? So would either of them blink in your opinion, or you more likely to see continuous escalation for a while that could lead to a continuation of full-blown war?
Ultimately, the U.S. will blink. Iran will not. If Iranian sailors and soldiers and military personnel die, even some Iranian civilians, Iran recognizes they're at war. That's the price of being at war with the United States. Whereas the United States is not prepared for casualties. And if they dare to insert a U.S. naval vessel into that strait, it will be sunk. And sinking that will lead to fatalities among sailors, and it'll be a big black eye. There will be demands for the United States to ramp up, to respond. Can't let Iran get away with this, and Iran will keep getting away with it because we don't have the military force. I think he still believes, based upon some of the intelligence that's been given to him, there's false intelligence, that Iran is struggling, and a little more pressure, Iran's going to collapse. He doesn't understand. No, Iran's nowhere near collapse. Iran is actually stronger and more united internally than they ever have been.
Johnson's prediction? US blinks, Iran doesn't. His reasoning is structural. Iran is fighting for survival on home turf with full backing from Russia and China. The US is fighting to restore leverage it had already lost. Depleted munitions, no safe staging area, and now a Chinese legal firewall around Iranian oil revenue. And Johnson raises something worth sitting with. The intelligence Trump is receiving tells him Iran is collapsing. If that intelligence is wrong, and every observable indicator says it is, then decisions are being made based on a false picture of reality. That's not a partisan point. That's a national security concern that everyone should be worried about, regardless of where you stand on this war.
Project Freedom launched this morning.
The announcement was made.
FAFO. No, this is madness.
Anti-foreign sanctions countermeasures with a specific injunction.
And here's the bottom line. I believe America can and will prevail, but only if we stop lying to ourselves. Project Freedom is a tactical gamble that has already been met with kinetic force. Our financial leverage is being legally dismantled by Beijing. Our constitutional guardrails, like the War Powers Act, are being treated like suggestions rather than the law of the land. We don't win by ignoring these problems. We win by facing them, innovating, and returning to the principles that made us the arsenal of democracy in the first place. We have the best workers, the best tech, the best framework of government in history. It's time we started acting like it. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to give you the data to decide for yourself. Larry says we'll blink. I say American ingenuity is our trump card, if we use it correctly. What do you think? Is this operation a necessary show of force or a dangerous end run around Congress? And how do we respond to China's financial declaration of independence? I'll be in the comments. Keep it respectful. Back it up with facts. If you value independent, evidence-driven analysis, share this video. The mainstream media won't cover the blocking rules or the war powers reset. We will. This is ARM Geopolitics. I'm Aaron Johnson. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never stop questioning. I'll see you in the next one.